Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session on tinkering in early childhood. We have a lot to cover, so we are going to get right to it. Throughout this presentation, please feel free to use the chat function and the Q&A if you have questions. We'd like to keep this as close to a dialogue as we can, even though we can't see you. So welcome, everybody. My name is Luigi Anzivino. I work at the Exploratorium in San Francisco in the Tinkering Studio. I am the professional development lead for the Tinkering Studio. And I'm here with my friend and colleague, Claudia. And you introduce yourself, Claudia?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Claudia Carl Sullivan, and I am the project director for early childhood tinkering programs at the Exploratorium.
So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about tinkering and what it means to us and how we conceive of it as a pedagogical approach. And I'll take care of that. And then Claudia is going to talk about how we have adapted that approach to the early childhood setting. But before we start, we wanted to kind of have a little bit of an interactive moment with you all through the chat function. And we're going to do this through this Chatterfall idea. And the idea is that we're going to ask you a question, and we'd like you to type your answer into your chat window, but don't hit enter yet. Don't send it off to the common chat until we say go, because we want you to be able to kind of think about it on your own and not be influenced by what other people have written. And also, it's really fun to see this thing come together all at once. So what we would like you to write in the chat right now is this: if you had to describe tinkering in one sentence, what would it be? So take 30 seconds or so and describe tinkering, whatever definition of tinkering you might have in your head right now. This is where we should have had a joke planned for this moment of waiting. So we'll give another 15 seconds of time to type. And if this works, we should get 381 different definitions of tinkering in just a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to count down from 3, and then I want you all to hit enter. So it's 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, maybe nobody did it. Maybe nobody has a definition of tinkering in their mind. That's fine. That's what we're here to do. Well, maybe those will trickle in eventually, or maybe people are trying to look for the chat function in the platform. Whatever the case may be, I'm going to tell you what our definition of tinkering is in just a second. But first, let's situate ourselves. Right now, I am at the Exploratorium, and maybe not everybody is familiar with what that is. The Exploratorium is a museum of art, science, and human perception that's located in San Francisco at the pier of San Francisco overlooking the bay. And inside of that Exploratorium, that museum, there are lots of experiences that we engage our visitors in. But it's more than just a collection of hands-on ways to engage with phenomena related to science and perception. The museum is really a living learning laboratory where our educational philosophy can be applied and tested with visitors. And that is the idea that learners are competent, curious, and capable of finding answers to their own interests and questions. Within that museum, within that space, there is an area called the Tinkering Studio. This is what it looks like, or at least it did before the pandemic. Things might have changed a little bit. But the Tinkering Studio is a flexible, multi-use space that is dedicated to developing and offering opportunities for visitors to think with their hands, That is to engage with phenomena at the intersection of art, science, and technology. So some of the projects that we offer to our visitors are building ball runs or creating circuits on paper or by sewing, creating large-scale stop-motion animations or massive collaborative chain reactions. These projects can span a wide variety of different activities and materials and ways to engage. They all concentrate on making something tangible and something personally meaningful to the learners. We call all of these activities tinkering, even though they're very different from one another. So one might ask the question, well, what is tinkering? Is it a collection of activities? But we think of tinkering as something that is a little more than a collection of activities. Tinkering for us is really an approach to learning. And I want to try to describe what that approach is. As an approach to learning, tinkering is guided by curiosity, by delight, by personal inspiration from the learner's perspective. And it aims to empower learners to explore the world by making something tangible, something physical. It's about, again, thinking of the learner as a competent agent in the world who's able to pose problems, not just solve problems that others have posed, with the knowledge they already have and with the help of facilitators. And there's a lot that we put into designing tinkering experiences, and it's hard to encapsulate it all into one slide, but we think that there are 4 components of tinkering that are very important that they be present when we design tinkering experiences. Those are play, exploration, choice, and collaboration. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about each of these 4 components. Let's start with exploration. When we design tinkering activities, what we're really doing is trying to define what we call an exploration space for learners to play within. And we think of an exploration space both as a physical space, but more importantly, as a conceptual space, a broad playground in which to explore a phenomenon that seems rich in opportunities to develop understanding about the world. So this is about providing both an inspiration that drives exploration, but also boundaries to the experience to guide the learner along as they explore. And to define these productive boundaries, we pay particular attention to 3 aspects of an activity. To materials, which materials to make available to the learner. We think carefully about how we set up the environment in which the learner engages with these materials. And we think deeply about which prompts and starting points are likely to lead to a wide variety of explorations. We particularly value this process that I mentioned before that we call problem posing to kind of distinguish it from problem solving. We prefer that learners don't spend most of their time solving problems that have been chosen by us as educators as problems that need to be solved. We're interested in learners choosing their own investigations in an intentional way. And we think that is a skill that tinkering is particularly well suited to support and to develop, and one that is likely to serve learners well throughout their lives. Within that exploration space, we like to explore in playful ways. And so play is a very important component of tinkering. And we design activities that focus and incorporate, whimsy and delight and joy. But we also recognize that there are many different types of play that children can engage in, from free play to physical play to play acting to games and sports. There's lots of different ways in which children learn and grown-ups play. We're interested in cultivating what we call purposeful play. And by this, we mean that we set an intention to spark playful explorations around a set of ideas and phenomena. Play is important not just because it's fun. Play is important because it encourages to explore the world around us in different ways. When we engage in playful physical exploration of phenomena like light or movement or cause and effect, we are able to access divergent thinking. We value inventive solutions and unusual solutions, and we also welcome unexpected outcomes. During these playful explorations, learners should always be in the driver's seat. And we believe that learners are most invested in learning when their ideas and their questions are at the center of the exploration. So while we as educators might set up an experience or an activity and provide some prompts to get people started, we like to allow each learner to set their own goals for the experience. So this is kind of a difference that we pose between a prompt and a goal. We think of prompts as an invitation to engage with materials and the situation, and it can be very useful to orient learners in an unfamiliar territory with materials they might not have encountered before, and encourage them, towards productive tinkering. A goal represents an end result to achieve, and designing for choice means that we largely leave goals up to the learners rather than designing for a specific outcome we want everybody to get to. So we allow learners to shift goals during construction, to abandon unproductive strategies, and to be inspired to pursue new and exciting ideas that might come up. And of course, as educators, we often do have a goal in mind or a set of ideas that we want to investigate and concepts that we like to surface. So for us, the art of tinkering really consists in staying in that tension between our goals for the learners and their goals that emerge while they explore. So one way to support this for us is to provide multiple entry points so that learners can get started in an activity from different starting points. And that allows them to use what they already know, the interests they already have, to get into the activity and to get started. We also like to design for a number of varied outcomes so that it is possible for learners to go in different directions and not everybody ends up with the same product at the end, and that there is room to pursue, personal goals and even wild ideas and things that we did not expect to see in the activity. And finally, we value collaboration. And by collaboration, we mean both collaboration between learners and between educators and the facilitators. We believe that, learning and thinking are social experiences, and that we all gain, vocabulary, ideas, strategies as we observe others and as we work with others, and read with others, and engage in dialogue with peers. So we value and design for collaboration over competition. And competition can sometimes, emerge, and naturally does emerge in the course of a tinkering experience. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But we're more interested in designing experience that leverage collaboration and the sharing of ideas, because we're interested in creating an environment where all learners are valued and all learners are supported. Ultimately, for us, tinkering is about building relationships. And we want people to be able to bring their whole selves to a learning situation, including the parts of themselves that feel more vulnerable and tentative. And we want people to feel like they belong in tinkering because of who they already are, not because of who we want them to become. So all of this work and all of these values for us are really in the service of achieving three big goals for us, which are to create a sense of belonging in science and art for the learners, to build a confident agency as STEAM thinkers and learners, and to be able to approach lifelong learning with a sense of joy and enthusiasm. For us, we think that our worth as human beings is not measured by what we know, but actually in the relationships that we build and we nurture with other people and with concepts and ideas in the world. And so when we can recognize through this building of relationships that we're not alone in pursuing growth, then I think it opens the doors to seeking help, to providing help, to offering help. We can start to see that mistakes and setbacks are part of the process, that failure and frustration is often the precursor to insight and to progress and to pride. So ultimately, we believe that tinkering should be really founded on equity and contribute to justice and liberation for all learners. And those are big, hefty ideas, but this is what ultimately we hope to achieve with tinkering. I'm going to pause here. I talked a lot. And if you have questions or things that you want to surface, please use the chat. And I see there's some Q&A. I'll take a look in a second. Meanwhile, Claudia is going to tell us a little bit how we use this approach and these ideas in the early childhood domain.
Thank you very much, Luigi. And thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Claudia Sullivan, and I'm the project director for early childhood tinkering programs at the Exploratorium. Today, I will be speaking about two projects. The first is called STEAM Starters, and the second is Tinkering Together. As you learned from Luigi, the tinkering approach lends itself very naturally to developmentally appropriate practices and consequently to fostering math skills and dispositions. Next slide, please. STEAM Starters is a project funded by the California Department of Social Services Child Care Development Division. This project is an online professional development course for early childhood professionals in the state of California. The module materials offer examples of how a tinkering approach can provide you with starting points to support children's STEAM learning. This course offers an integrated approach to learning. In tinkering, as children engage in playful exploration, as Luigi explained, they develop skills and understanding in many areas of learning, including mathematics. And STEAM Starters is not specifically focused on teaching math as a standalone subject, but it does offer opportunities to meaningfully engage in STEAM learning to support children's holistic growth. And this slide shows you what the layout of the online course looks like. STEAM Starters will be hosted in SECO, or the California Early Childhood online website. So the 8 modules provide you with background materials and activities to implement tinkering in a variety of settings. Next slide, please. So the modules provide information through videos, and you can see in this image that it's it's a big video screen. Next slide, please. As well as context setting readings. And the context setting readings involve an in-depth think through and discussion of what tinkering is, how it's related to children's development, what the connections are to STEAM. And it also, very importantly, asks you to engage with tinkering as a learner with an activity that's called Tinker for Yourself. one of the things that we believe in is that it's important for adults to immerse themselves in tinkering or before they engage with children. So that piece of the course we think will be really interesting for all kinds of educators. Next slide, please. And we also have activities for children and adults. And so the the activity guides for children, there are 3 large activities and 1 for adults that just explain tinkering together. Next slide, please. So the activities for the children's activity guides explore phenomena of balance, motion, and light. And in here, you get a little bit of a preview of what the guides look like. And as I mentioned, the ramps and rollers is tinkering with motion. Shadow stories is tinkering with light. And balancing sculptures is unstable table is tinkering with balance, which is the activity for children. And the balancing sculptures is an activity where you tinker for yourself as an adult. So the material sets have been carefully considered for early childhood. And mostly I would say that it's for the 3rd and 4th grade age range, although we have been piloting this work and have been, and I know one of our sites has been doing it with toddlers, but mostly I would say it's for the preschool children. Next slide.
And sorry, Claudia, you meant 3 and 4-year-olds, not 3rd and 4th grade, correct?
Yes. Did I say 4th grade?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, maybe because it's 7:30. I'm tired. It's been a long day. Yeah, no, I meant 3rd and 4-year-olds, not 4th graders. Let's not go there. Yeah. So yeah, we can watch these little kids play. But basically, we just wanted to provide you with an example of an activity we developed for the project that it's called Unstable Table, and which is a balance and stability exploration designed for young learners. And we found that tinkering with balance can be a really rich space for exploration, not only because it's an interesting phenomenon that gives direct physical feedback, but also because it gets at creative risk-taking. And also it emphasizes process over product, since definitely things are going to fall over. So so as you can see, it also is very tied to math, even though it's not explicit, but there's a lot of counting, there's a lot of prediction. You know, they're just, but it's done in a way that is integrated with the exploration rather than an end in itself. So yeah, if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this, so the bad news is that these materials are not available to the general public unless you have access to SECO. So the good news is that we are working with the state of California to use the videos and guides outside of the course. So we'll keep you posted to see where and when that might be possible. Also, do note that if you're going into SECO right now to find a class, is not available yet because we're not done with it. So we're completed. We have completed the English version, but the Spanish version is still in the works, and they need to come out together. So I would imagine that will be coming out pretty soon. So be on the lookout for it. All right. And now the next project, the next slide. Thank you. So this next project is called Tinkering Together. And this is a project funded by the National Science Foundation. And our goal was to develop a new way to offer a conference for the early learning and care community. And the challenge in trying to offer a conference during the pandemic, I mean, clearly it's just there were just many considerations around it. So next slide, please. So we wanted to develop a an experience where educators could share their work related to making and tinkering. Although this event is not focused on math, I'm sharing it with you because it offers the opportunity to learn more about the tinkering approach through the voices of real-world practitioners. And I think that will give you a sense of ways in which this kind of multidisciplinary approach comes to life in ways that is just, I think that you can sense just probably in relatable ways with people that are on the ground doing it with kids all day long. So next slide, please. You can hear educators speak about tinkering and making in a podcast series that is hosted by NPR correspondent Anya Kamenetz, or watch a video mini-series featuring tinkering in a variety of places. So from a library and a museum to home care provider settings. These are vignettes of practice that are, I think, very inspiring and give you a sense that, real people in real world situations are integrating this approach, and you're probably already doing it as well without knowing that you're probably doing it. So, so they're lovely ways in which you can learn more about tinkering and what in ways in which you can probably engage with the practice and not feel like it's out of your reach. And you can access this content, which is free and on demand, at tinkeringtogether.org. There's been a slight change to the website, and it's the tagline has changed a little bit just because the events, some of the live events took place in March. So it's if you go now, it would be confusing to call it a tinkering festival because it's no longer a festival. So if we can go to the next slide. So at the time, we offered some live workshops in a fireside chat. Luigi did a live workshop on spinning tops, and we had another colleague who did a balance workshop. And we also had kind of a culminating fireside conversation between Anya Kamenetz and educators that participated in the project and also in the podcast series. So next slide, please. We also experimented with including community resources, and it was important, again, for us to showcase grassroots educators and their voices. So we have some stories of practice, and the most important thing was to feature educators front and center, explaining tinkering through their personal experiences. And the educators talk about how tinkering leads to playful learning, how tinkering supports experimenting with ideas and approaches to problem solving, how it helps develop science knowledge and builds skills for early language, literacy, math, and social emotional development. And I think that that Tinkering Together illustrates real world educators integrating tinkering into their everyday practice. So next slide, please. So this project, again, is funded by NSF, and you are, next slide. And you're welcome to visit our website, which is a tinkering, our Tinkering Together, not Tinkering Together, but our Exploratorium Tinkering Studio website, because you might want more resources on how to do, for example, unstable table. And we don't want you to feel frustrated that you can't get the information on SECO or anywhere else right now, but there are some resources for early learners that you can begin noodling around with. So let us know how it goes, because we've been experimenting with all of this since 2018. Early learning is a newish community for us. So doing this work with the state is brand new. And so we're hoping that it's actually useful. And if it isn't, or it can be more useful, it would be helpful to know about it. So do let us know. So I think this is the end for me. And if you have other questions, we're really happy to answer. We left a little time because we wanted to make sure that we're answering your questions and engaging in some conversation as best as possible with this kind of setting. So thank you so much for your time, and let us know if you have any questions.
Thanks, Claudia, and thanks for all the participants. I realized that I was totally looking at the wrong chat when I was complaining of nobody putting in their definition of tinkering. Instead, there is a ton of really interesting things that now I'm going to have to go back and look at. But I can finally, I see where they are now. It was completely user error. Yeah, wondering if there are questions or ideas that this presentation brought up for you. One prompt that we could offer for you to put in the chat as a way to respond to what you've heard so far is something that we do at the end of our own workshops as a reflection on the process, which is this: I used to think about tinkering, and now I think. In other words, how is there any way in which your thinking or your understanding of what tinkering means to you, or how it could be used or helpful in the early childhood learning space has changed for you? That could be something to respond to in the chat right now. If not, we'll wait for questions or ideas from you. I'm looking through the definitions of tinkering now, and I think there's really interesting ideas relating to both experimentation and playfulness, and trying to do something without knowing how to do it, but also about developing critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, communication. And I think it gets to this combination of the materials and the way you engage with the materials are really a way to get to play and engage with ideas and with learning itself. So we think that tinkering has the ability to become kind of a meta way of thinking and developing your own ways of learning about the world.
And while folks are thinking about the question, Fern had a question, and she says, I'm very interested in activities for use with very young toddlers, ages 14 months to 2 years. So I think that EHOMA at Transbay has been using it with very young kids. But as I mentioned before, we haven't really experimented enough or implemented it enough with that age group. So I'm not really sure what your thoughts are, Luigi, on that.
Sorry, say that again. I was trying to read some of the questions.
You're trying to do two things at once, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, so the question that Fern posed is that she is very interested in the activities for use with very young toddlers. And the guides that we develop for STEAM starters have a material set that is geared really much more to a little bit older kids, 3 and 4. I think that you could do some adaptations, but those adaptations are not recommendations that we have included in the guides. So that's, I think, how I would answer that question.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, some of the educators, so as Claudia mentioned, like this work was done in collaboration and co-development with a series of educators that we work with, some of whom had younger learners and some of whom were in-home childcare providers that had very mixed learners, some very young. And so we kind of naturally learn from them that there are adaptations that you could do to your materials that make them a little bit easier for younger learners, especially the manipulation aspect. We have not provided those specifically in the guides because they are really aimed at a 3 to 5 year old set of learners. But we think that it's very possible to adapt tinkering to very young learners, and you can also maybe adapt a little bit your what counts or how you consider manipulation or building or making, right? Yeah, I love these definitions that are coming in. Some of the questions that I see here are, one question is whether people can come to the Exploratorium. Is it open to the public? Yes, we are open to the public. We're open right now. We're having a after dark 18 and over evening event. While I'm talking, there's people walking around enjoying the museum right now. Yeah, please come visit. I love Abby saying, I used to think tinkering was for creative people, and I think it is a way to bring out the creativity in all learners. Absolutely, tinkering is a way to engage creatively with learning and with materials, but it's not, you don't need to be a creative or consider yourself a creative person. A big idea in tinkering, I think, is to provide multiple entry points, like I mentioned, so that if you consider yourself to be a science nerd, there will be something there for you to enter with. And if you consider yourself an art person, there will be something there too. And then through the process of tinkering, hopefully you can stretch your own identity a little bit in the other direction that you weren't already familiar or comfortable with, and hopefully expand your own understanding of yourself and your belonging into all areas of learning. The Exploratorium itself is a museum that combines science and art in really interesting ways, and we like to say that both science and art are ways of noticing and observing. So it's a very familiar approach. Jessica says, I used to think you needed a lot of expensive materials, but it can be done with everyday items. Absolutely. We emphasize that every time we can, and tinkering can be done with very simple materials, and it can also expand to fancier materials if you have the ability to. Megan, inspired by the notion of collaboration versus competition, letting the child lead by choosing their own investigation versus giving a prompt. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Are you seeing anything interesting to pick up on, Claudia?
I just had a comment too, that something that we didn't really talk about, but that is something that we've been really thinking about, which is the literacy connection. And there's a lot of books that we make recommendations for the activities that are, again, integrate math concepts in ways that are that I think that are super helpful. Especially, I've been seeing some comments from people that want information or ways to adapt the activities for early, for toddlers or for younger kids. Mm-hmm. So there's, for example, a little book that's called Stack the Cats, and it's very sweet and it's very visual. So that there definitely are resources that we've been sourced. And so I would encourage you. I was just looking for our book list, because I think that would be an interesting resource for you to also think about.
Yeah, and we also have, anecdotal evidence of children just, math and number sense is something that is very rooted in a child's natural way of exploring the world. And so providing these ways of exploring the world that are a little more structured, but still have opportunities to develop in various directions, they just provide so much for educators to work with and pick up on moments where math naturally emerges. We have a beautiful story of a child playing with lights and objects, figurines to create shadows, and starting to notice the relationship, right, between how many lights there are, how many objects there are, and how many shadows are created. And, starting to make very explicit connections that are beginning to be, about numbers and about multiplication in some way as well. And so, those are then moments that can be picked up by educators to reinforce those ideas or to make connections with other moments that, that introduce math. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people are picking up on our friendship and admiration for the Reggio approach, and the idea of competent learners definitely is very inspired by that.
Yeah, and one of the things that Andres was saying at the end of his talk was the ties to social-emotional learning and the ways in which young children have to deal with frustration. So whether it be, this frustration-rich experiences, for example, with balance, they're baked into the activity. I mean, a balanced activity things are going to fall. That is inevitable, and so having an activity that is designed around failure in many ways, it's super interesting, both for you as a teacher to observe how they are managing that, but also as a way for them to learn that it's okay, that even if adults are doing balancing activities, it's going to fall, the project is going to fall off even if you are an adult. So having that understanding that adults also fail is super important for young kids. And some of the anecdotal evidence that well, not evidence, but anecdotal stories that we've been hearing from the sites that we work with is that it helps them become more resilient and more apt to try the activity again, or to become a buddy to help somebody figure things out. So that is another interesting aspect to this kind of learning.
Yeah, that's right. And we really hope that the tinkering can become a disposition over time that has to do with, feeling like the world is knowable and that you have the agency to go about learning about the world. And if that goes through, failure and things not working out, that is just part of the process of knowing. And so we often like to say that tinkering is about making an environment where people can be comfortable not knowing and can be comfortable exploring vulnerable ideas that are tentative and they're not sure about. And especially when you're very young, I think a lot of your ideas are tentative and you're not sure about it. So it's important to create this nurturing and, failure rich environment where failure is actually celebrated in a true way, not just tolerated, actually celebrated.
Yeah, and we had a question from Diana asking when the STEAM Starters course, or what the name of it is as you look for it in SECO. And it is called STEAM Starters. But as I mentioned, the course is not live. So if you're trying to look for it and you're not finding it, it's because it was not going to be available yet for a couple of months.
Yeah. And some people are asking for our website. I can put it in the chat. Definitely.
And I think we're at the top of the hour as well.
I think we are. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And thank you for all the comments and questions and your interest in the topic. And happy tinkering.